And it was 8 a.m. in the morning. This woman rang me and she said, "You don't know who I am, but your device saved my life, and it's Thanksgiving, so I wanted to ring you to say thank you." And I'm like, oh my God, like, who are you? What's this about? And it was traumatic brain injury related headaches that had been so bad it made her suicidal. And it was after that call that I was like, okay, the only thing we need to do now to make sure that this succeeds in one form or another is to get 1,000 devices out in the real world.
Welcome to Startup Health Now, the podcast where we cover the entrepreneurs shaping the future of health and the health moonshots they're working to achieve. I'm Logan Plaster, editor-in-chief at Startup Health. They say that necessity is the mother of invention. Never has this been more true than it was for Richard Hanbury, CEO and founder of Sana Health. 23 years ago, a car accident left Richard with debilitating nerve pain so bad he was given just 5 years to live. One night, while watching a film, he realized that the movie was doing something to his brain that was providing pain relief greater than what he was getting from morphine. This accidental discovery set him on a decades-long journey to learn how he could use external neuromodulation, applying light and sound, to hack his own brain and cure his chronic pain. Richard succeeded in interrupting those pain signals and has been pain-free for more than a decade. Now, with his company Sana Health, he's created a consumer wearable that reproduces that same neuromodulation. It's currently registered as a wellness device, but Hanbury is working on multiple clinical trials to officially prove out the technology's pain care potential. This episode of the podcast starts with Richard's harrowing car crash in Yemen and ends with his health moonshot to end all chronic pain in the next decade. It's an incredible and inspiring story. Hope you enjoy. And my understanding is you were in a car accident in Yemen. That's correct. You went off a bridge instead of go head-on collision with another car. You went off a 60-foot bridge, right, into a riverbed, crumpled your car, should have died probably, but miracle, you survived, and here you are talking to me today. We'll get into the whole kind of what that led to, but what do you remember from that, from the hours and days after that happened?
Well, to start off with, I was actually clinically dead for 8 minutes.
You were?
Yeah, with no EEG activity either, and conscious thoughts of the entire 8 minutes. So that's a whole other area of research that eventually I'll get into. Luckily I didn't remember a lot of being in the Yemen because I was left next to someone else who was dead and left in a pool of their own blood on the floor for 2 of the days. And there was no food and there was no water in the hospital. And my car passenger with a total of 5 different broken bones was still hobbling from the village to the so-called hospital with water and biscuits to force feed me to keep me alive until the plane medevaced me out. So luckily I don't remember much of that time.
Wow. You went through, life-saving surgeries and treatment, and yet at the end of it, I understand you were still dealing with such debilitating nerve pain that you were given 5 years to live. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah.
5 years. What is it like? I mean, how can you describe to somebody this idea of a chronic pain that's so bad that it is, it can end your life?
I think the normal way I try and persuade it to explain to people is basically take the worst experience of pain you've ever had, which for almost half the human population is childbirth, and imagine that pain there the whole time. So even when I was dreaming, 50%, even when I was asleep, 50% of the time I was asleep, I was lucidly aware while I was dreaming that I was in pain. So for me, there's no way I would have survived 5 years. If I hadn't believed there was a way out, I would have checked out of the equation myself. It's just I mean, now I forget how bad it was, but every couple of weeks I get about 5 seconds of nerve pain, and it's nearly always from waking up in an odd posture. And that 5 seconds is enough just to remind me, oh, yeah, that was what it was like 24/7. And oh, yeah, okay, it really was that bad. Because, cognitively, my brain doesn't want to acknowledge that it was that bad. But it really was. It's your whole body's in fight flight the whole time. So that's why you have a lower life expectancy, because everything's broken. Anything that breaks, your body can't fix it, because you always are in fight, flight, or rest recovery, or somewhere between those two extremes. And your body can't do both, and severe pain pushes you into fight, flight.
You said that if you hadn't believed that you could do something, that you could get better, that you would have seen no reason to go on. What gave you the hope and optimism that something could change?
It was a particularly important, for me, Bruce Willis film that saved my life. It was Hudson Hawk.
I was going to ask you about Hudson Hawk later.
Yeah. That was it. It was the end of that. It was the end of that movie, and realizing that the good bits of the movie has lowered my pain more than morphine. That I was like, holy shit, there's that changed my pain levels more than morphine.
What year were you in your 5 years when you were given 5 years to live?
That was the first year. I was still
year one.
I was still in hospital at the time.
Okay, you're in the hospital. Pain is absolutely excruciating. You're dreaming in pain, and you see Hudson Hawk in the hospital. You just see it on like a hospital screen.
Yeah, it was one of the first times I was out of bed and able to actually move around at all. And it was in the TV video room. Okay. And it lowered my pain enough for me to be out of pain. Sorry, not out of pain. I was still in a lot of pain, but be out of bed for 90 minutes while I was watching the movie.
Okay. So what was it about the film itself? And I guess now would be a good time to explain kind of what your professional background is. The fact that you saw that, noticed what was happening, and then connected the dots to something deeper versus just having a chuckle and going on with your day.
Well, I mean, when you're in that level of pain, you can't not notice the differences. Yeah. Tiny changes you're super aware of when pain's that bad. And it basically, that film has really funny, fast-paced set pieces where they're burglarizing museums to music and singing show tunes, like "Swinging on a Star" is the one that most people remember from that film. And in between times, some really bizarre dialogue and script. And for me, that was a bit like watching your favorite show and the adverts come on. It has your attention. It has you in what we would now call a flow state. And then when it gets less engaging, your brain goes into the higher beta frequencies, and then you feel more pain. Okay. And the second thought after holy crap, that changed my pain was wow, and the bits of the film that made me feel better made me feel like I used to when I was skiing. Because skiing was and horseback, and what Americans call horseback riding. Still find that expression really weird. It's like, what other part of a horse are you going to ride? But yeah, it was those two things that were my experience of flow state prior to going into hospital. And so I was like, okay, I need to find a way to reproduce that state reliably. In hospital, they did try and give us meditation as a essentially suicide prevention measure. It was okay, well, nothing else has worked, so maybe this can take the edge off. But have you tried meditation yourself?
Very hit or miss, not really.
So the core of meditation is getting you into greater present moment awareness. And that's a really stupid thing to do if you're in just mind-blowing levels of pain. It's the last thing in the world you should be doing. So opioids, for example, opioids are called painkillers, but it's a lie. It's a really, really bad name. because they don't kill pain at all. All they do is mask it.
Mm.
They make you cognitively unaware of the pain that your body's in. So every other biomarker for pain is still there when you're taking opioids. You're just cognitively not there. You checked out, either to a small degree if it's a small level of opioids, or unconscious if you're on enough morphine to make you pass out. And so it's really sort of it was understanding. Okay, hang on a minute. So that actually changed my pain levels, and I was conscious. So that made me think. Okay, well, if I'd already learned how to meditate really well, if I'd been a meditator for 20 years, then that would be useful right now. And I was like, okay, well, I can't learn, because that's like holding a candle flame to a hurricane. It's just stupid. And I was like, okay, well, what does a long-term meditator's brain look like? How does long-term meditation change your brain? Not just while you're meditating, but what happens afterwards. And luckily for me, it's not just the shoulders of a giant. It was just some extraordinary talented effort has gone in from lots of areas of research into how meditation changes the brain. And by 92, there was already 50 years of it. And there was a particular guy called Maxwell Cade who wrote a book called The Awakened Mind. And he did very large numbers of EEGs of long-term meditators. And I bought the same equipment that he had used. I measured my own brain. I compared it to the scans that he had of long-term meditators, and that's what gave me the roadmap from A to B from where I was to where long-term meditators were. Okay. And that was the key breakthrough.
How did you draw the line between Hudson Hawk and this idea of long-term meditation tricking your brain into looking like or acting like a brain that had been meditating its whole life?
Well, it was really because and again, I didn't. So Chick Melnihai had written his seminal work on flow by that stage, but I hadn't ever read it. So to me, it was just, okay, this feels like I used to when I was skiing.
Got it. Flow state.
And I was like, okay, well, that's a different state of consciousness. So, and meditation is designed to help you learn how to change states of consciousness.
Got it. Okay.
So that was like, okay, well, I can't learn, but what does it look like once you've already learned? Once you're already brilliant at it, what does that mean? What does that look like? And had I been limited to academic journal research on that, I probably wouldn't have found it, and I probably wouldn't have got there. But for me, luckily, in the 70s and into the early 80s, there was this whole movement towards democratizing and making available the benefits of meditation, mostly in the US at the time. And then Maxwell Cade wrote this book that was designed for an average person to understand the basics of how things change. And that's what gave me my window into the whole area.
Gotcha.
And yeah, without his work, I wouldn't have figured it out.
And what was your professional background that kind of gave you the foundation for that?
None. So my high school biology teacher was actually one of the world's top experts on the neurobiology of memory. And at high school, he was like, well, plants are boring, so I'm not going to teach you about that. I'm going to teach you all about nerves in the brain. Okay. So I got lucky in that regard. But then my undergraduate degree was actually Arabic. Okay. And I was in the Middle East because I was learning Arabic. So I had to learn everything from scratch. So it was just the biology teacher who gave me some foundation to understand how the whole thing fit together.
So this really was necessity as the mother of invention. So this is when we enter into sort of the multi-decade montage of building up this company. You go from someone with an idea to then how many years later, 25 years later, where we are today, where you've gone from ideas to prototypes, you built a company. Sort of give me that high level montage of kind of like how that process worked and sort of bring me up to where you're at with your company today.
Yeah, for sure. So it was 6 years of lots of mini tests. with me running around with laptops, wires, boxes, nothing that was scalable, that all required me to sit with someone while I'm up to an EEG, use the audio visual stimulation, change how the brain was working, and then go away again. And that covered everything I could think of. So a lot of sports work, a lot of military work with special forces on everything from PTSD to marksmanship to speed driving. Because essentially, if you can produce a flow state, there is no area of mental wellness or mental health that you can't affect.
Yeah.
So we did mini trials on stroke, TBI, PTSD, and performance.
I know the current product is a headpiece that uses light and sound to kind of hack the brain. Was that always the methodology, or was there an evolution?
Yes. Yeah, no. So I mean, I did look through all the other ways of doing neuromodulation, but essentially, if you're applying electricity to the brain, you've got to go through the skull. So you've either got to implant a device like Medtronic's deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's, which is, obviously not that scalable, because opening someone's skull is not ideal. And the other small caveat that takes, hundreds of millions of dollars to get through, to develop and get through regulatory approval. So that's one avenue that wasn't open. Or you could do electricity from outside, but then you've got to get through the skull. And the skull is literally not conducive to doing that. So all of the ways in which neuromodulation is done with TDCS and other technologies, it's got to get through bone to get to the skull. So it's a blunt weapon. And then you've got magnetic stuff, things like transcranial magnetic stimulation. But again, you've got to get through the skull. So your options are, you make your magnet powerful enough, so you're stuck in a clinic because you can't send someone at home with a massively powerful magnet because they can,
right.
Their kids can mess themselves up, or they can mess themselves up. You can't administer magnetic therapy without a doctor being the one doing it, essentially. And that leaves sort of audio-visual. And audio-visual, you're essentially using the visual cortex and the auditory cortex as your electronic touchpad into the brain. So you're sending a signal into the brain that the brain is then converting into the electrical signal that you want. So that's the hack. That's the shortcut of the way to do it. And so it was always so. Other than those early attempts to try different ways, it was always audio visual. The big difference was EEG. So all of the original work I did on EEG, so measuring electrical activity, but you can't automate EEG. Because there are two problems with it, or two main problems. One is that is the sort of electrode system. You've either got wet electrodes, so you've got to get someone to clean their skin and stick a wet electrode on, and there has never been an at-home use device that has succeeded with the wet electrodes on the head. People just don't want to do it. And the other potential solution is you've got dry electrodes. Well, for dry electrodes, the best I've ever tested come from a company called Muse. Have you come across them? The brain sensing headband?
Yep.
So they are awesome. They've got over 1 million EEG traces from people doing meditation. And that's fine for meditation where you've got people keeping still. That it doesn't tolerate movement. And with sleep and with pain issues, you've always got movement. So for me, I had to wait until I had a heart rate variability sensor. And heart rate variability measures small differences between each heartbeat, which then gives you a measure of systemic relaxation.
Okay.
So you can really see on a very deep and visceral level exactly where someone is on the balance between fight, flight, and rest recovery.
Got it.
Which, because that's what we're trying to get to with the device, means it's actually a better way of measuring it than EEG was in the first place.
Okay, so just so I understand, so there's a wearable device it goes over your eyes. It's soft, so you can wear it while you sleep, and it delivers this sound and light stimulation to kind of give you a neural stimulation, kind of hacks your brain. And at the same time, it's reading your you said the
heart rate variability.
Heart rate variability, right? HRV. so it knows how relaxed you are, it knows what's working, and I'm guessing it then feeds data back to the system. Is there an AI component?
Yes, so this is the current version of the device.
Nice.
So you're getting pulses of light through closed eyes and sound through headphones, and then that little sensor on the forehead is the heart rate variability sensor. This version, which is the current version, is designed to wear either during the day or as you're going to sleep, 16 minutes each time, although you can use it for shorter and it's still going to deliver a result. And so you put it on, you press play, you're getting pulses of light through closed eyes and sound into your ears. It's really very gentle. And then that is getting you into a very deeply relaxed state. We are collecting that HRV measurement at the moment via an app. In the next version of the device, it will then be integrated into a closed loop feedback system. So the device will adapt to an individual in real time.
Gotcha.
AI we will then be doing machine learning in the cloud to work out new potential ways of improving the algorithm for whether there are differences by gender, by age, by disease indication. All of that stuff will work out to create new algorithms, and then each algorithm has to be then put through an FDA indication. So to go back to sort of your multi-decade montage, it was 6 years of trial and error. Basically every small study worked in every area, but I didn't have a business model around it that was going to work. So I went to business school to try and figure that out. Then I went to McKinsey in London to try and figure that out. And then by the end of that, I was like, okay, there is no business model that ever was going to work around the one-on-one treatment, because neuroplasticity is a function of frequency and intensity. Okay. So if you're trying to solve pain or sleep problems, then it's a little bit every day is what actually works. Okay. And in that circumstance, you can't have someone go to a clinic.
Yeah.
It just doesn't, there's no way to make it work. So eventually I stopped looking for a business model that was going to work in a way that wasn't going to work. And I was then on the hunt for tech. And eventually the tech showed up, or the first version of it turned up from an Air Force medic that I had done one of these small studies with. That was actually on US Air Force pilots on prevention of G-LOC, which is gravity loss of consciousness. So go around a corner too fast, blood drains from your brain, you pass out, you die. So how to stop that. So we did a mini test. It worked on improving it. And that was one of the many studies where at the end of it, the person was like, okay, great, now what? Where is the device we can use on our own? And I explained the problems to him at the time. And then he sent me this device and I was like, okay, this is gonna be useful. This is gonna what's enabled me to make this standalone device. And so that was when I restarted the company in 2015. We were focused on consumer sleep because I was like, okay, sleep underlies every area that we have anecdotal data on and small pilot data on, from stroke, TBI, PTSD, pain, all of it. And turns out that investors really do not like consumer health. And specifically within consumer health, they really, really, really just like consumer sleep. And the reason is because there's so much junk in the space. Okay. And so if you're an investor, you're basically saying, okay, do I trust these guys to make a piece of hardware in an area that it doesn't really matter whether it works or not? AKA the My Pillow guy with his pillow. 25% of people like it, the rest don't. And yet he is a marketing genius. And basically if a VC is looking at a startup with a technical background without the marketing genius, you can't get a marketing genius until you've got enough money to pay them. Yeah. Or you've got enough traction to prove that it's worth their skills to do it. Yeah. And there were plenty of times where had we had that marketing genius on board already, we probably would have got funding to go down that route. But that's why we then switched towards being a medical device. We did our first 3 pilot studies, opioid use disorder, where we got a 45% reduction in anxiety at the worst point of a methadone addict going through withdrawal, fibromyalgia, which is the big one. And then we applied for our 513G approval from the FDA, which basically means we are now on market as a wellness device. So the only claims that we can make currently in any sales kind of venue is on improving improving physical wellness and optimizing mental health. So everything else I've said in this interview, and anything I will say about pain, etc., is they're all forward-looking statements that we are going through clinical trials in order to prove out what works. Okay. And one of the challenges I've had is that people look at my video and my story, and then they expect sort of a silver bullet that's going to fix miracle. Their pain. Yeah, and we will find. I'm completely convinced that we will find subpopulations within at least spinal cord injury and phantom limb where that is the case, like me. Now, because pain, really, what pain is a combination of central mediation and peripheral pain. So a signal coming up from your body and how your brain interprets that. With my type of spinal cord injury pain, that was very specifically not a pain signal coming up from my body. It was a corrupted data stream, which the brain goes, ow, I don't know what that is. That looks painful, so I'm going to call it pain. So when you trigger enough neuroplasticity, in my case, it totally removed all the pain. Now, there will be, I hope, other subpopulations that we are that fixed for. In the other end of the equation is something like chronic regional pain syndrome, where you have a really nasty pain signal coming up from the body, and your brain amplifies it a bit because of anxiety issues, sleep issues, all those kind of things. So those we look like we're showing somewhere between a 10 and 30% reduction in pain. Everyone else is somewhere between those two extremes. Okay. So fibromyalgia is a really good example. Everyone with fibromyalgia has actual physical pain that is amplified in the brain. Got it. So fibromyalgia itself is a pain amplification disorder. So we are helping with the amplification bit, leaving the actual pain bit. Got it. Which means that so far we're getting around about a 45% reduction, a 45% improvement in quality of life, which is a massive deal if you're not expecting anything. Yeah. So we are on market as a wellness device.
What's your next big study? I think I heard something about Mount Sinai.
Yeah, we've got two large studies underway at the moment. Mount Sinai is neuropathic pain, and Duke is fibromyalgia. We're expecting the Duke study to finish first, and that will then be the subject of a de novo application to the FDA, which hopefully then we will have sometime in late Q1 or into Q2 next year. The Mount Sinai study will then be a self-predicated 510K. The next big study to start is a treatment-resistant depression study, which is starting in Aurora Mental Health in the next few weeks. Gotcha. So those are the big ones. We've got some other great small stuff going on, or small at the moment, which will expand. Yeah. We've got a whole bunch of stuff happening with NATO on fatigue mitigation with special forces, people in different countries.
What I hear you saying is there are so many applications for this. Once you get over the hump of understanding the science and that it's not just a bunk offer, for somebody's idea for how to help sleep, that there are just a lot of applications. You said that 5 years ago, you really ran into trouble with investors. They weren't interested in consumer sleep because of that. But I understand that you've had a fundraise recently.
Yeah, so we've just closed on total. We've raised 5.8 million over the last sort of 6 months. 4 million of that was in a rolling close on Safe Notes, which have now just converted because we've closed the first 1.8 of an equity round. Okay. That was the first bit was led by Founders Fund, The second bit has been led by Grey House Partners, who are a Canadian VC that specializes in psychedelic pharma. And then now we have 3 million remaining left open in this round. We are trying to COVID protect ourselves by having enough money to get through into Q3 next year.
I mean, you have really stuck this out. I mean, 25, 27 years at this process. Is that right? And here you just raised 5.8 million. You got these studies going on at Duke, Mount Sinai. Do you feel like the tide is turning? It really feels like people are finally understanding what it is you're working on, and it's making a lot of sense to people.
Yeah, we're very nearly there. I had a thing that happened. It was Thanksgiving last year. I was lying in a hotel bed in San Francisco. My car was under 2 feet of snow in Denver airport, so I couldn't even have gone home if I wanted. If my wife and kid had been at home, I still couldn't have gone home. And it was 8 a.m. in the morning. This woman rang me and she said, "You don't know who I am, but your device saved my life, and it's Thanksgiving, so I wanted to ring you to say thank you." And I'm like, oh my God, like, who are you? What's this about? And it was traumatic brain injury related headaches that had been so bad it made her suicidal. And it was after that call that I was like, okay, the only thing we need to do now to make sure that this succeeds in one form or another is to get 1,000 devices out in the real world.
Yes.
And now, I mean, the clinical trials were great, and when the results come through, that also will be a turning point where we are no longer at risk of survival. It's just a question of how long does it take us to then scale up, and how do we scale up, and what's that look like? Yeah. But the next step is we are going out to do 1,000-person user test on fibromyalgia. So that's now the big push, which is now we are looking for every person who suffers from fibromyalgia, because there are no good solutions. The very best performing drug is Lyrica, which has so many side effects that 80% of the people who start using it stop, and even those that maintain use, the average improvement is 15% in the quality of their life. Got it. And we're at 3 times that with no side effects. So the aim is get 1,000 people with fibromyalgia using, and then at that point the company has zero chance of failure, because those people won't let it. That's the aim. That's just like that woman
who called you. That's awesome, Richard. I think that's the time that we have. If people want to partner with you, they want to be a part of that trial, and they watch this video, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
The best way is actually through the website, and either for anything for the trial specifically should go to info@sana.io.
Okay.
And anything related to sort of investor side should go to me at richard@sana.io.
And the main site is sana.io.
That's right.
Awesome. Richard, thank you so much for taking the time. We could go much deeper. It's a fascinating story, and I'm just proud of you for sticking through it for so long, and excited that it feels like things are clicking. People are understanding what you're working on. It's such an area where we need good science, good devices, cut through the noise, and there's a lot of people who you're really going to help. So, Richard, thank you so much. Startup Health invests in health transformers from around the world who are committed to achieving audacious health moonshots. If you want to learn how you can join this community of entrepreneurs, or if you want to connect with one of our 330 companies, go to startuphealth.com. Thanks for listening to Startup Health Now. We'll be back next week.